Greetings, everyone. Welcome to Sabbath services. And since we're getting close to the Passover, and there is always a dispute about whether the bread for the Passover should be unleavened or leavened. Maybe some of you never heard of that, but that exists. And remember, every time there may be something a little difficult to understand, someone's going to have the theory to explain it, something other than what it really is. So, our advertisement today, thanks to Ken. What kind of bread? Christ's Last Passover, leavened or unleavened. Okay? And this is by Ben Ambrose. He wrote this years ago because it came up. Okay? And it's keyed on the thing, the sop. Now remember, covered that, okay, that if today you have unleavened chips and you can scoop in some avocado, or that's called guacamole, and salsa, then that's a sop, okay? Now, last time we finished up the page 304. So today will be the last 10 days of Christ, number 5. And we will finish it with this so that everyone will have everything before Passover. Because it wouldn't be any good to have this as a special series for Passover and half of it comes after the Feast of Unleavened Bread. That wouldn't work out too good. So this will be number 5. Okay? Now, I have to make one correction. And that was, I said last time that when the vinegar was given to him, he refused it. That was not correct. He received it. The first time they gave it to him, he refused it. The last time, he received it. And then he died. Okay? Now, let's come to the next page, 305. Now, remember, this was a tremendous event in the world. And now we've covered, there was Satan, there were the angels, there was Christ, there were all of the religious authorities, and this stark battle going on back and forth. Christ had to die at the right time, and so that's why the authorities were frustrated in their efforts to get Jesus ahead of time because it had to happen at the right time. Now, when he died, okay, now, section 362, Matthew 27, verse 51, the earth shook. Now, how much of a shock was it? And the rocks were split. Now, here in California, we have quite a few earthquakes. So we know what it is. And every once in a while, we have an earthquake at night before you go to sleep, and you're laying there, and all of a sudden, the house starts going like this. Okay? And we have a lot of minor earthquakes that aren't even felt. Okay? So this was a fantastic thing to declare how important his death was. So the rock split open, so that the tombs were opened. Now, the tombs were different from what we have today. They would dig a small cave inside the rocks. And then, just like Jesus' tomb, they rolled a big stone in front of it. Now, they would do this. They would have the stone cut and put right alongside the opening. And they would have a wedge right under the bottom of it, so it wouldn't move until that wedge was released. And so these tombs open, meaning the front of those caves, the stones came off. Okay? Now notice what happened. And many bodies of the saints who had died were resurrected, and after his resurrection, okay, they weren't resurrected before Jesus' resurrection. Couldn't be, because the firstborn from the dead was Christ. Okay? were resurrected. After his resurrection, they came out of the tombs. So, the statement above, now this happens a lot in the Bible. Make a statement to declare what's going to happen. And it says, we're resurrected. But the question is, when? A lot of people think that they were resurrected right away, but they weren't. And after his resurrection, they came out of the tombs and they entered into the holy city, appearing to many. Now, what if you had one of your relatives just buried the week before, okay, and you were still mourning? Since others were resurrected before, there was no conflict. But after his resurrection, they went into the city, which says then that they didn't stay alive in the tomb for 3 days. Okay, so they had to be resurrected after he was resurrected. And I think on the day that Christ was resurrected, it's important that he was first. Okay? All right. Now, when that happened, and there was the earthquake, come here to the next section, 363. Then the centurion and those with him who had been keeping guard over Jesus, seeing the earthquake. Now, remember what happened with the earthquake. The veil was split in two and opened so that the Holy of Holies was seen. Now, that means they could not have had any sacrifices at the temple on the day that Jesus died. They would have to move everyone out, plus whatever damage was done to the temple area. Okay? That took place, were filled with fear and said, so here's what the centurion said, truly, this was the Son of God. Now then, notice what has to happen. Whenever you have a scheme, you've got to have some way to make it appear right. Well, now, Jesus was buried. We'll see this in just a little bit. So let's come to the next section, how Jesus really died. Now, you can tie this in with Psalm 63. It says he died of a broken heart. That means a heart that was pierced, not emotionally, that his emotions were broken. Okay? So the next section, the Jews wanted Jesus' body off the cross before the holy day begins at sunset. The Jews, therefore, so that the bodies might not remain on the cross on the Sabbath, because it was a preparation day, for that Sabbath, that is the one coming, was a high day. So this tells us this is the first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread. That's the only day that comes after the Passover day, right? Yes. Requested Pilate that their legs might be broken and their bodies might be taken away. Then the soldiers came and broke the legs of the first and the legs of the other who was crucified with him. But when they came to Jesus and saw he was already dead, they did not break his legs. Now this also fulfilled another prophecy. Not a bone would be broken. Okay? And that's why I want you to go through the 28 things that were fulfilled on the Passover day. 28. And if you do a little mathematics, it's impossible that all of those would have happened coincidentally. Okay? Now, verse 34 tells you why. But one of the soldiers had pierced, and that's what it is in the Greek, past tense, had pierced his side with a spear, and immediately blood and water came out. Now, the way that spear was put in, it was put in from the right side and thrusted up and got his heart. Because all of his blood had to be shed. He could not have died with blood in his heart. It had to be shed. Okay? And he who saw this has testified, and his testimony is true, and he knows that what he says is true, so that you may believe. Now, this is John telling you that, look, what I'm writing is true. I saw it. I was there. For these things took place so that the scripture might be fulfilled. There it is. Not a bone of him shall be broken. And again, another scripture says, they shall look upon him whom they have pierced. Now, at this point, the next section, the women are there, they're watching this. Now, think about this. They were hoping, as the two men from Emmaus, as we'll cover a little later, that he was going to be the Messiah. And what was the version of the Messiah they were looking for? A man to come and take over the government and raise up an army and get rid of the Romans. Okay? So, when he died, they didn't know what to do. And they were still blinded, even the disciples. They didn't understand what he meant 3 days and 3 nights and the third day and being raised from the dead. Okay? So they were watching afar off, and I imagine a lot of them were really disappointed. How could it be that the one who's the Messiah dying, when the prophecies we read say he's going to save us from our enemies? Okay? The answer is because God has a greater plan than any has ever thought of. All right. Now let's follow along in the next section. Come over, we'll skip 365 and come over 366. Now let's pick it up in John 19. Now, this becomes very important here. Now after these things, Joseph, the one from Arimathea, being a disciple of Jesus, but having concealed it for fear of the Jews, asked Pilate that he might take Jesus' body away, and Pilate gave him permission. Then he came and took away the body of Jesus. And Nicodemus, the one who came to Jesus by night at the first, also came, bearing a mixture of myrrh and aloes, about 100 pounds. Then they took Jesus' body and wound it in linen cloths with Aramaics, as is the custom among the Jews to prepare for burial. So the shroud is a complete fake. Now consider this. When they wrapped Jesus' body, what did they do? All of the flesh that was there that was misplaced by the beating was probably put back in as they wrapped it. Okay? You look at the shroud. If the shroud was just placed over Jesus, where are all the beaten marks on his chest and on his arms? Not there. So they wound it. Verse 41, now there was a garden in the place where Jesus was crucified, and in the garden a new tomb in which no one had ever been laid. Because of the preparation of the Jews, they laid Jesus there, for the tomb was near. All right? Then I'll let you read the commentary on the 3 days and 3 nights. Now, all of this is very important because in order to say there were 3 days and 3 nights between Friday evening and Sunday morning, to have a resurrection on Sunday, which it wasn't. Some of the commentaries even say that when it was dark between the 6th hour and 9th hour, that was the first night. Well, how could it be the first night? Because Jesus was still on the tomb, on the cross rather, not in the tomb. Okay, so that could not be it. And there is no way anybody, anywhere, at any time can get 3 full days from Friday night to Sunday morning. Okay? Then you go through the whole commentary that we have written there. Now let's come to the map, 2-page map on page 320 and 321. Now, we'll have to confess to one typo in all the harmonies. And it's one very hard to catch because it's very small. I'll show you what that is in a minute. But the way this is laid out, look how it's laid out, okay? The Hebrew days of the week. 5th day, Nisan 15. 6th day, Nisan 16. 7th day, Nisan 17. 1st day, Nisan 18, right across the top, okay? Now notice, we have sunset, sunrise, sunset, sunrise, all the way through. Now, for there to be 3 whole days and 3 whole nights, the only way that could be with the Passover in the middle of the week. This year, with the way that the Passover is not a week in which that could happen in this sequence. Okay? But next year, and the next 5 years, we will have 3 Passovers out of 5 with a Wednesday Passover. Okay? So we've got each day, first night, first day, second night, second day, third night, third day. Now, come to third night, third day, come to third day, the very last scriptural reference there. Mark 16, verse 1, that should read Matthew 28, verse 1. And you see that? See where it is? Come to Nisan 17, okay, that's on the right-hand page, 321. Nisan 17, look at the day portion, come down to the very bottom where it says Mark 16:1. See that? Okay. That should be Matthew 18:1. And we'll see why in just a little bit. Okay. Now I want to read something important. Now, remember, when all of these things were being put together with the harmony, we didn't have instant search on Google. Okay? We had to get the book, we had to get the quote, we had to correctly copy it and everything. But notice this, even though when you read the Apostolic Fathers and Ignatius, he was the first one to start out with the Sunday resurrection, and coinciding that with the Passover time. Okay. But how many years did they understand it was a Wednesday crucifixion? Let's read the footnote on page 321. Knowledge of a Wednesday crucifixion was passed down for at least 3 centuries after the founding of the Apostolic Church. Now also remember this. The Romans had the Julian calendar, and every 4 years they would lose a day, which meant that spring was moving closer and closer to winter. And pretty soon, Easter was beyond the spring equinox. Now that continued all the way down to Pope Gregory, when they finally corrected the calendar, and they had to take 10 days out of the calendar. Have you ever read that? Okay. How did they do that? They saw that they lost 10 days, so what they did, they had October 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. And the next day was the 15th. Okay. And they put in the 1/4 day accumulated to have a leap year every 4 years. Now, the calculated Hebrew calendar was always on time. And the Catholics couldn't figure out how the Passover was getting further away from their traditional Easter. Now you look at it this year. Easter Sunday is the day after the first holy day. And the first holy day is a regular Sabbath. And that Sunday is the first day of the count toward Pentecost. So whenever that happens, the church, the Catholics, and the Jews all have Pentecost on the right day. That's the only time. Okay? Let's continue on here. The Didascalia, which dates from the 3rd century, offers historic evidence that the belief of a Friday crucifixion was a change from the original teaching. The following description of the day of Jesus' crucifixion appears in Book 5 of the Apostolic Constitutions, which contains the original words of the Didascalia. Quote, "For they began to hold a council against the Lord on the 2nd day of the week in the 1st month, which is Xanthicus. And the deliberation continued on the 3rd day of the week. But on the 4th day, which is Wednesday, they determined to take away his life by crucifixion." Apostolic Constitutions, Didascalia, Apostolorum, Book 5, Section 1, Paragraph 6. Now today, you might pop that up in a few seconds on a Google search. But that shows they knew. Okay? Continuing now, a church historian explains the significance of this record of the Didascalia. The only reason can have been that Jesus' passion began on a Wednesday, the day when he was arrested and crucified. All right. Now, let's see what happened after that. Okay? Now, when you read these scriptures the way they should be, okay, let's also understand this. The Passover day was always a preparation for the night to be much observed. Because you have the Passover day, you begin with the Passover at night. Then comes the day portion, and you're preparing for the night to be much observed. When it becomes sunset, that's beginning the 15th day. So, that means that whenever the Passover is on a Wednesday, you have Thursday as a holy day, Friday as a work day, or preparation day for the weekly Sabbath. So that's where the confusion comes with people. They can't understand that in the Passover week, when the Passover's on a Wednesday, that the day portion of the Passover is preparation for the holy day, which is a Sabbath, and then Friday, the day after, is preparation for the weekly Sabbath. So when you properly put it together with the scriptures as we have here on page 323, here's what we have. Let's begin in Matthew section 367. Now on the next day, which followed the preparation day, the chief priests and the Pharisees came together to Pilate, saying, "Sir, we remember that this deceiver, while he was living," okay, he said, "After 3 days I will rise. Therefore, command that the sepulchre be secured until the 3rd day, lest his disciples come by night and steal him away and say to the people, he's risen from the dead, and the last deception shall be worse than the first." They had no idea what was going to happen. So let's think about our petty little trials today. We don't have petty little trials. We may have some emotional ups and some emotional downs, but is anyone coming knock on your door ready to take you out and throw you in jail? Is anyone ready to thrust the spear through your stomach and kill you instantly? No. Our biggest problem is we have so much of everything everywhere that we have become so blatantly calcified in Laodiceanism, it's hard for anyone to put up with anyone who has any passion or zeal. They, oh, well, you can't talk like that. Just like they do with Trump. Okay? Well, you shouldn't tweet. Well, if he didn't, do you think they would tell the truth? Of course not. Okay. All right, let's finish this here. Then Pilate said to them, "You have a guard, go make it as secure as you know how." And they went and made the sepulchre secure, sealing the stone and setting the guard. Now, what does it mean to seal the stone? Did they put glue around it? No. I suspect they used their fine, hard limestone concrete and sealed the stone, and when that dried, there was no way it was going to be opened. See? So let's go on with that in mind. Preparation day for the weekly Sabbath, Nisan 6, section 368. Now when the Sabbath had passed, that is the first holy day, Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of James and Salome, bought aromatic oils so that they might come and anoint him. Now, Luke 23:56, and they returned to the city and prepared spices and ointments. All right? That was a whole day affair. So what was coming on after that day? The weekly Sabbath. Okay? So it shows here, they rested on the Sabbath according to the commandment. So this could not be the holy day, because the holy day, you can have a feast. You can do a lot of things. You can do whatever is necessary in preparing food and so forth. But you can't do that on a regular Sabbath, because there's a commandment, you shall not do any work. Right? Okay. We got that picture with the setting sun to show Sabbath is ending. Okay? Now, toward the end of the weekly Sabbath, Mary Magdalene and Mary go to observe the tomb. Now, this was quite interesting when I was preparing this, because the Greek does not say when the sun was rising. It says when it was dusking toward the first day of the week. Okay? So, that also tells us this Sabbath was the seventh day. Okay? So let's read it. Now, late on the Sabbath, as the first day of the week was drawing near, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary came to observe the sepulchre. Why did they go to see it? They just wanted to find out. Well, you wondering, what happened? Is the guard there? How did they seal it? Okay? So they went to look. All right? Now, you've got all the commentary. I want you to read it. Events of the first day of the week, wave sheaf offering day to the Ascension. Okay? Now, let's come all the way through that commentary. I'll leave you to read it. We'll come back to some of it a little later here. Okay? Now, all of this can become a little confusing unless you have all four accounts, page 334, on the first day of the week and the women coming. Most people have the idea that all the women came together at the same time, but they didn't. Okay? Now let's come to section 371. Let's see what it took to open the tomb. Matthew 28, verse 2. And in the morning, suddenly there was a great earthquake. So it had to have that hard concrete, lime concrete there to seal it. For an angel of the Lord descended from heaven and came and rolled away the stone from the door and sat upon it. See, the angels are busy, the demons are busy, Satan is busy, everybody's going crazy trying to get this thing done. See? Okay? Now his appearance was as lightning, and his raiment white as snow, and for the fear of him, those who were keeping guard trembled and became as dead men. Okay? Now that had to be revealed to them by Christ a little later on, because no one was there to see it. See? Okay. Now, section 372. Okay. Now, let's come over here and see the progression. First, John 20, verse 1. Now, here's something interesting. Now, on the first day of the weeks, ton Sabbaton, that means the first day toward counting to Pentecost, the first day of the weeks. Okay? Now, plural in Sabbath otherwise can be tois, sabbatois. So this is a special one. While it was still dark. Okay, so this was, how could you say, 5 in the morning? While it was still dark. Mary Magdalene, she comes first alone. See? Came early to the tomb, and she saw that the stone had been taken away from the tomb. So she saw it, and then she left. Then she ran and came to Simon Peter, the other disciple whom Jesus loved, and said to them, "They've taken away the Lord from the tomb, and we do not know where they have laid him." They still didn't understand about the resurrection. Okay? Now, let's come to not Mark, but Luke 24. Okay? So the first one, Mary Magdalene, while it was dark. Next one, Luke 24 and 1. Now on the first day of the weeks they came to the tomb at early dawn, bringing the spices that they had prepared, and certain others came with them. But not all of them. Let's come to Mark now. So we have before, while it was still dark, we have early dawn. Now, let's come here to Mark 16. And very early on the first day of the week, at the rising of the sun, they were coming to the tomb. So there were these groups of women, okay? And we're asking themselves, who will roll away the stone for us from the entrance of the tomb? For it is a massive stone, but when they looked up, they saw that the stone had been rolled away. And after entering the tomb, they saw a young man sitting on the right, clothed in a white robe, and they were very frightened. But he said to them, "Do not be afraid. You're seeking Jesus the Nazarene, who is crucified. He has risen. He is not here. Look, there is the place where they laid him." And we will see what that is in just a minute. Go tell his disciples and Peter that he goes forth before you into Galilee, and so forth. Okay? Now, account in Matthew 28 just summarizes that. Now let's come back here to the account in John 20. Verse 4. Now the two ran together. The other disciple ran faster than Peter and came to the tomb first. And he stooped down and he saw the linen cloths lying there. Now, he was wrapped. Saw the linen cloths rising. Question. Does a spirit being need to be unwrapped, or can he just come through the cloths? He can come through the cloths. So they saw the outline of where Jesus' body was, where the cloths were, and then probably dipped in the middle because his body wasn't there. Okay? Now that's quite a thing to see. Just picture it if you were one of the disciples and you came down there. Okay? And remember, all women, if you think God is against women, who discovered that he was resurrected first? The women. Okay? Let's go on. Then Simon Peter came following him, but he went into the tomb and saw the linen cloths lying. Now continuing in John 20 on the next page, verse 7. And the napkin which had been on his head, specially covering his head, was not lying with the linen cloths, but folded up in a place by itself. Now, what does this tell you? Jesus was resurrected out of the linen. It stayed there in the form of his body with the dip in the middle because his body was gone. But he took the napkin off his head and folded it and put it in a different place. Now, all who do laundry know clothes do not fold themselves. Just think how much you could make if you could have clothes that could fold themselves. Okay? So this tells you what? He's alive. Amazing. Okay? Now, verse 8, then the other disciple who had come in, he saw it to the tomb first, but also went in and saw these things, and he believed. John was the very first one to believe about the resurrection. For they did not yet understand the scripture which he decreed that he must rise from the dead. Then the disciples went away again to their home. Okay? Now then. No one has seen Jesus yet. They've only seen the tomb open. They've only seen the linen cloths and the folded up napkin. Mary Magdalene didn't come running with Peter and John. She went and told them. But she probably walked. Imagine how she was dressed and the dresses, the way they dressed then. Women are not going to be running. So she walked back there. Okay? Mark 16, verse 9. Now after Jesus had risen early the first day of the weeks, Now after Jesus had risen, because he had risen before she got there. Early the first day of the weeks he appeared first to Mary Magdalene, from whom he had cast out 7 demons. She went and told those, so forth, who were groaning and weeping. Didn't believe her. Now we come to the details in John 20. Now this is quite a thing here. Quite a story. Now, all of these tell us how important that everything about the life of Christ really was. See? And we can't take it for granted like the Protestants do. See, the whole thing they want to get to is have your sins forgiven. And they think everything is accomplished at that point. But that's only the beginning. Okay? Now John 20 and verse 11. But Mary stood outside the tomb weeping. And as she wept, she stooped down and looked into the tomb. Double checking. Is his body really gone? And she saw 2 angels in white who were sitting, one at the head and the other at the feet where the body of Jesus had been laid. Okay, so we have, some of them saw one angel, probably got so excited didn't even see that there was another one. So here there were two. And they said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping?" She said to them, "Because they've taken away my Lord, and I do not know where they have laid him." And after saying these things, she turned around and saw Jesus standing, but did not know it was Jesus. And Jesus said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping? Whom are you seeking?" Thinking he was the gardener, she said to him, "Sir, if you've carried him away, tell me where you have laid him, and I will take him away." Then Jesus said to her, "Mary." Turning around, she said to him, "Rabboni." That is to say, teacher, probably like more, "Rabboni." Jesus said to her, "Do not touch me, Key, because I have not yet ascended to my Father, but go to my brethren and tell them that I am ascending." Now notice this. This is a tremendous understanding of what God is doing. See? "I'm ascending to my Father and your Father, and my God and your God." Mary Magdalene came to the disciples bringing word that she had seen the Lord and that he had said these things to her. Okay? Well, let's go ahead and take a little break and continue on so we can finish this, because it gets more exciting as we go.
Fred, you tell it good. You're like